Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you, Travis, for joining us and give me 10. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Roger, for having me. It's a privilege.
It's an honor for us to have you. I understand you have a specific ministry. We're going to talk about podcasting today, and I have some relevant and important questions that we're going to get uh, done in 10 minutes. And I know, having been a guest in your podcast, that this is a passion of yours. And there's a lot of people who might be watching today who like or are thinking about podcasting. So let me ask you the most obvious question that I have. I try to channel the questions of people. In a world with a billion podcasts, why one more?
Well, I appreciate that question because I think it's the most relevant. And for me, I would say that the podcast is your as a pastor, it's in a life that is just crazy and hectic. It's a way to duplicate yourself in a way that you'll never imagine. I mean, you can literally take the time to craft an episode, and with podcasting, it's much more intimate than a video, than social media. When people are listening to a podcast, they are connecting to you as a person, and so you're able to connect as a local pastor. Primarily, you could start with your church members and say, look, this is a way for my church members to get to know me. But beyond that, it's a way for your community to get to know you. I think a lot of times when people think about podcasts, they think about going national, going global. And one of the unique things that I learned with my podcast is the primary impact was local. The people who downloaded my podcast, if I look at the radius around Daytona Beach, Florida, 75% of my podcast downloads are from people living in Florida, and specifically on the East Coast of Florida. So that means even though the podcast can be downloaded from all over the world, and it's really a local outreach. And I think pastors kind of maybe don't realize that. They think of all these global podcasts and they're like, oh, I'm not like this person, I'm like that person. No, you have to think about it as an extension of your local ministry to your church members and your local community. And it's just been a great way for me to share my passion. And it's been amazing to see the response from my church members and as well as the community surrounding that have responded to the podcast as well.
Okay. Well, so instead of saying this is for the world, you're thinking about this is for my world. So if you were to summarize your podcast, how would you summarize? By the way, we're going to link in the description of this video. We're going to put links. If you can send me what you consider your 3 top podcasts, right? Your 3 top episodes of your podcast. It's like you've done many of them, but these are the top 3 that I think can when somebody can listen to them, they can understand like what my podcast is about and the impact it has. All right. So we're going to put that in the description. But summarize your podcast for me. What is it about?
So the name of it is Adventology, and it's kind of a word that I kind of made up based on eschatology. So I definitely focus on, be ready for Jesus is the tagline. So people who listen to this podcast understand that whatever we're going to talk about is going to tie into the idea that Jesus is coming soon, and how do we live in light of that knowledge. So we can cover a variety of topics, but that always is the driving theme. And I think that's really important to any podcast. You can cover a lot of topics, but you have to have a theme. You have to have something that kind of drives your content, drives, your brand, it drives, people's understanding of what you're about. And it can be really about what you're into. I just personally happen to love, Bible prophecy. I love topics related to, preparing for that. And it's just a natural thing for me to try to make something relevant that I love and to put it in a way that people can relate to me in the process. And also, I didn't mention this, it's a great opportunity to connect with other pastors, other leaders, because the podcast gives you a connection. You get to go on somebody else's podcast, they can come on yours. You get to expose your people to people that you appreciate, and then they can, your own church can be edified. It's so much easier to do a podcast with someone than fly someone in and put them up in a hotel. You can just have, and then your church, your community can be exposed to that. So that's what mine's about, and it's served me well.
All right, perfect. Let me ask you the question that every pastor who's watching this is asking themselves. So what's the benefit in doing this? Can you share with us one quick story about an actual result that you saw? When that happened, you said to yourself, well, this is why I do this, right? This is the reason why I got the equipment, and I got over my, like, don't say no to yourself, and like, who's going to listen to you, and this is why I recorded it, and I edited it, and I put it on social media, and I asked people to listen to it. This is why I did this. Share with us a quick story.
So the first episode I recorded, I kind of just shared my testimony in a way that I thought, just kind of connected my interest in podcasting and being creative and just doing something different. It was really an experiment. I hadn't spent a lot of money or invested a lot of time into it yet, but it was something that I already was interested in because I was listening to podcasts and I was curious about the effect it could have. So I would say it was two things. The first time was the first episode when I sent it out, and I sent it out to people that I really wanted to get their opinion on. And I got enough positive feedback and encouragement from that initial episode to continue down that road. But it wasn't until I was probably in episode, well into like episode 15. I wasn't really seeing, and this is just something that you just have to prepare yourself for. You can't just get caught up in the numbers, because that can depress you, or you might think, oh, I'm just plateauing, I'm only reaching this number of people. Trust me, you're building content, and it eventually, if you're consistent and you continue to work on it, it's going to all of a sudden start exponentially growing. That's what happened for me anyway. And but one story in particular was when somebody showed up to church and literally asked if they could join our church because they had just binge listened to like 12 episodes of my podcast, and they had found it on our Facebook page, and they were looking for a church. They saw the podcast there, and they just sat for like 2 or 3 days, listened to the episodes, and they showed up to church. And then that individual ended up being baptized just shortly after that, and has been like an awesome member of our church. And so when I saw that happen, I was like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Yes. And so now I'm only reaching people, but now I'm seeing the fruit coming back to the local church. So that, to me, I mean, I could tell other stories, but that was definitely the big one that really
perfect. But that's a perfect story, though. That's a perfect story, because God blesses. And it's important what you said, this consistent content that helps people eventually. People give up too early. They give up right before a breakthrough. Many of the times, that's when the attacks are higher. So we have a minute and a half left. Tell me something. This is my last question for you today. Tell me something. How do you get over imposter syndrome, right? When you're first putting all this stuff together and your content, and you're thinking to yourself, well, who's going to listen to me? I'm not the pastor of a mega church. I'm just Travis in Daytona Beach. How do you get over and continue to do it even when episodes don't do as well as other episodes, right? And you might have 1,000 downloads in one and then 50 in another, and you're like, man, is this the end of this? How do you get over imposter syndrome?
Yeah, for me, I have to admit, it took a little while to kind of get comfortable listening to myself. And I'm sure if you did videos, it'd be the same way, looking at yourself. That actually quickly, you can get over that if you just push through the first few episodes. But to me, the biggest hurdle is just knowing your why. You have to know your why. You can't just do it for a hobby, or, I mean, you could, but you're just not going to stick with it. You can't just do it because you think it's cool or it's the trendy thing to do. You really have to know your why. Why am I doing this? And does it align with your personal vision and goals for your personal life and your local church ministry? when you see how it can connect to your personal why and your local church ministry, then it just becomes an exciting thing. You're not focused on yourself. You're focused on the goal. You're focused on the why. And as long as I stayed focused on the why, I was able to continue to produce. And when, maybe we can talk about burnout another time, but that's something that helps prevent that when you're focused on your why and you start to obviously see some fruit that really, gets the motor going after that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Travis. Adventology is a podcast. We're going to link it in the description. I'm going to link the 3 episodes. Thank you for being a guest today on Give Me 10. Much blessings to you and to the podcast as you start this new season. May you be blessed, and thank you for listening today.